It was a dark night. The apostles had just sat down and had a very strange meal with their rabbi. Judas had left quickly, and Jesus had washed the feet of all of his disciples. He told them things that were distressing, that were worrisome. This whole week, in fact, leading up to the Passover, had been a trial. The disciples had been with Christ before to these festivals. They had come up to Jerusalem with him before, and while things with Jesus were never calm, they had never been this distressing. It was almost as if Jesus knew he was leaving them soon. But they knew that couldn't be the case. He was the Messiah, the chosen one, the very Son of God, as Peter had proclaimed. Who could stand against us? They just knew that Rome would fall, and all of the nations over all of the world would come and bow at the feet of Israel. They just knew it. The prophets spoke of it. They knew they had the victory. Yet, their teacher, this whole past week, had spent every night in prayer into the wee hours of the morning in the Mount of Olives. He had been racked with worry and with fear, and yet he would go into prayer and he would come out and he would be ready to go. It would seem like nothing could stop him. But this night, this Passover night, as they walked to the Mount of Olives, as they walked to the garden with their master, it was different. He had bid them bring swords. Was this the time? Was this it when they would rise up and overthrow the Romans? They had seen him make bread and food out of nothing. Surely, then, if he calls for swords, this would be the time. After all, they didn't even need one sword per person, just 2 swords, and they were good. But it was different. It was distressing. It was weird. And so they go to the garden. And as they arrive, Jesus tells them all, be in prayer. Don't fall into temptation. And he takes a few of them, his smaller group, he takes them aside and says, pray with me. Continue to wait up and pray with me. I don't want you to fall into temptation. And so Christ goes deeper into the garden, a stone's throw away, and he kneels in prayer. And he prays, Father, let this cup pass from me. Let it move beyond me. And he was praying, and he prayed so hard, and he was under such pressure and vexation that his sweat was his blood. Yet after every utterance, he would say, Father, not your will, not my will, rather, but your will be done. After spending some time in prayer, he came back to his disciples, and to his dismay, he found them sleeping, fast asleep, for they were troubled. And so awakening them, he said, can you not stay and stand watch with me for 1 minute? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Pray with me. Stay awake with me. And again, he left them. And again, he prayed to his Father, Father, let this cup pass from me. Let this baptism that I will undergo pass. But again, Father, not my will, but your will be done. Again, after much prayer, after much anguish, he again comes to his disciples and finds them asleep. Rather than waking them, he retreats back and prays again. And angels came and ministered to him to strengthen him and encourage him, to let him know that he was not alone. Finally, Christ returns to his disciples, but the time has drawn near. Arise, he says, awaken, for the Son of Man is to be betrayed into the hands of sinful men. And as he spoke it occurred as a crowd of men came, led by one of his very own apostles. They came into the garden and they arrested him. One of the apostles in haste struck out with his sword, but Jesus stayed his hand and healed the man who was wounded. He said, "Do you not know that there are 10 legions of angels waiting for my word? It will not be like this." And he looked at those who had come to take him and to capture him, who had come with force against him. And he said, "This is your time. Darkness reigns." And so they took Jesus. At that time, all of his apostles scattered. They all ran. One, a young boy who fled. He fled naked after they had grabbed him. He was so terrified. Peter followed at a distance and kept pace with the group, trying to blend in, trying to stay near his master, the one whom he had proclaimed as the Son of God. They took Jesus into the chambers of the high priest. They took him before the council, a hastily concocted trial, a farce if there ever had been one. They didn't even have the full meeting of the Sanhedrin there. And so Christ stood before these sinful men with their sinful desires, their desire to rule instead of God. And he sat there and he took their punishment as they falsely accused him of many crimes. Finally, the high priest said, "I demand to know, are you the Son of God?" And Jesus merely looked at him and said, "It is as you have said." The high priest cried out, "Blasphemy! What more do we need?" And they tore their clothes. They blindfolded him and had him struck repeatedly. And they would say, "Prophesy, who hit you?" When they were finished degrading him, being the cowards that they were, with the inability to bring forth his sentence on their own, they dragged him before Pilate, the Roman prefect, the governor of Judea. And dragging him before Pilate, they said, "This man has committed many crimes. He has said that we should not pay taxes to Caesar. He has raised a banner for himself. He has proclaimed himself to be King of the Jews. He must be put to death." Pilate looked at him. "Are these things they say true?" He would not respond. After many questions, he went out to the high priest because they would not enter. It was the eve of a Sabbath. They would not enter into his house. He came out to them and said, "I find no basis for charge." And they kept imploring Pilate, "No, he must be charged. He must be put to death. He's a Galilean and he is raising a banner against Caesar." And so Pilate said, "He's a Galilean. Herod is in Jerusalem. We'll send him to Herod. He is one of Herod's wards." So he sent him to Herod. Herod was well pleased to receive Jesus, for he had been looking for him for a long time. And he was hoping to receive some type of sign. And so he put many questions to Jesus, yet Jesus would not respond. Jesus would say nothing to Herod. And so Herod mocked him and had him beat and put a purple robe onto him and sent him back to Pilate. It was that day that Herod and Pilate had become friends. Standing once again before Pilate, now with a large crowd having gathered, Pilate implored the crowd and said, "Let me release him to you. Let me punish him and release him, for I find no fault with him." But the crowds cried out, "No, give us Barabbas. Give us Barabbas. Put this Jesus to death." And Pilate would not do it. He would say, No, I will punish him and let him go. There is no basis for a charge." And again, the crowds cried out for Barabbas. And so finally, Pilate said no one last time, but then the crowds cried. He claimed to be a king. "We have no king but Caesar. If you release him, if you let him go, you are no friend of Caesar." This declaration perplexed and worried Pilate. And so finally he gave in and he said, "As you wish, I will release Barabbas to you, and Jesus we will crucify." At that point, the centurions came and took our king. They took our Lord and they beat him mercilessly. They crowned him with a crown of thorns and mocked him and beat him repeatedly with a cat of nine tails, a torture device that would rip the body. After being beaten severely over and over again, after being mocked over and over again, he was given his cross. But too weak to bear it, they grabbed Simon the Cyrene, and they had him carry the cross to his place of crucifixion. They led him there and they crucified him at Golgotha. They raised his body between two thieves that mocked him. One thief, finally realizing what had occurred, said, "No, don't mock him. He doesn't deserve this. We deserve this. This man does not." And he pled with Jesus, "When you are at your Father's side, please remember me." And Jesus looked at him and said, "I promise you this, today you will be with me in paradise." As he sat there on the cross, crucified, the Jews continually mocked him. There was a sign above his head that said, "Jesus, the King of the Jews." The Pharisees were upset and angry over this, and they implored Pilate to change it, but he would have none of it. "I have written what I have written." The Jews mocked him continuously. They hurled insults at him. And during this time, Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the council, a member who did not approve of the things that had done, had decided that he would put Jesus in his own tomb, a tomb that none had ever laid in. He decided that if no one else, he would care for the body of our Savior. At this time, Jesus finally looked up and said, "It is finished." He cried out and surrendered his spirit to God. At that very moment, the sun darkened, the earth quaked, mountains split, and the dead were released from their tombs, and many holy ones were seen throughout the holy city. Even the pagan soldier, the Roman centurion standing on guard, looked up at him and said, "Behold, this is the Son of God." At that very moment, the curtain that stood between the holy and the holy of holies tore from bottom to top, tore cleanly in half. The curtain that once separated the people from God was no more. After he had died, Joseph of Arimathea went and requested the body of Jesus. Pilate was surprised. He was shocked. He did not expect Jesus to be dead so soon. So having it verified by his centurions, they took the body of Jesus down and they placed him in the tomb where he was sealed in. At this point, the Jews went to Pilate and said, "Provide us a guard. Let us make the tomb secure. For he said that once he died, he would raise in 3 days. And we don't want his disciples to come and steal the body and proclaim that he has risen. So allow us to go and make the tomb secure." And Pilate said, "As you have said, let it be." So they did. The soldiers, they had a Roman guard set over the tomb. They sealed it shut, rolling a giant boulder in front of it. The centurions would make sure that his body stayed where it was laid. And yet, Mary and another woman who would follow him went and took spices to prepare the body. And they were wondering how they would roll aside the stone. If maybe the centurions would find some mercy in their hearts to help them prepare the body, to finish it. And yet, when they arrived that Sunday, that first day of the week, to prepare his body, they found the tomb open. And there were two figures gleaming like bolts of lightning. And they said, "Why do you search for the living among the dead? He has risen. Don't you know? He has gone in before you. He is already out. He is already risen." And so, bewildered, they raced to tell the apostles. And two of the apostles, Peter and John, raced to the tomb to see. John, stopping at the entrance, looked in and saw only the grave bandages. And Peter, not even waiting, rushed into the tomb to find his Lord, but he was gone. It is this hope, it is this wonderful event that we celebrate today. It is this wonderful event in history that we are celebrating. This event was witnessed not just by the apostles, not just by the women who found the tomb empty, but he was witnessed to have arisen by over 500 people. Over 500 people witnessed our resurrected Lord. It's an amazing thing. Yet, today, we are facing a dark moment. This Easter is like a celebration of Easter I've never seen. We have an empty building. We have no one here. Our sunrise service, everything is online and digital. It's another dark day. Just as when Jesus was captured and struck and his disciples fled, today is a dark day. And yet we come together and celebrate in hope. But let our hope not be informed. Consider that as a Christian, Christ asks his disciples to follow him with a cross. Paul will rejoice in his suffering. Peter will encourage us and remind us that we will face suffering, and that suffering that we face is not an if, but a when. As a Christian, we are told and called on to face times such as these. And the reality is, in the history of the church, we've faced many such times. We have faced many dark days. As a Christian, we must know that suffering and sacrifice are not ifs, but wins. And the real question that we have to consider today is not why I suffer, because the why of suffering is honestly the easier thing to ask. It's the easiest thing to answer. I suffer because this is a fallen world. I suffer because this world contains death and disease and calamity. I suffer sometimes because of my own wickedness, and I can suffer sometimes because of the wickedness of other people. Finally, I may even suffer because God has willed it to be so, just as he did his Son that day that he was crucified. No, the real question that we are forced to ask is, what is my response going to be when I face hard days, when I face dark times, when darkness seems to reign? What is my response going to be? When I am the one suffering, and when I am the one who is asked to sacrifice, like my King was asked to sacrifice, what will my response be? The reality is, the crucifixion of Christ offers us hope that is just unsurpassing. It offers us a hope of eternal life. It offers us hope that can be filled in with prayer, because he has risen. Therefore, when we face hardship, the thing we must remember is to pray earnestly for relief. We must earnestly go to our Father and make our hardship known to him. Let him know that we need relief, that we need him. We need to pray diligently for strength, constantly in prayer and petition before the very throne of God. We need to pray hopefully for better days. Did not Christ in the garden pray these very things? Did he not pray this very way? Did he not pray for relief? Was he not strengthened? Did he not look forward to better days? Even in the prophecy of Isaiah, what we were just looking at, better days were promised. Hope was assured. And so it is with us that we must pray and look forward to better days. We must pray unceasingly for his glory, his honor, and that his church might grow. But finally, resolutely, and above all, we must pray for his will to be done. This is a joyous day, a day where we celebrate our risen Lord. But just like then, now we face dark days. We must face them head on. We're going to suffer as his church. Oftentimes, we are called to suffer more so than anyone else. Christ demonstrated that. Peter warned us of it. Paul lived through it. But we don't suffer without hope. A hope that is made sure because Christ arose. This morning, you may not feel like you have that hope. For those of us in the church, we know we have that hope because Christ rose and we've submitted ourselves to him. But maybe this Easter, you're there, you're home, you're watching this, and you have no hope. You are terrified. You are fearful. The things that they're saying on the news and the government is scary. Maybe you're all alone and you feel it. If that is the case, I don't want you to hesitate. Pick up the phone, call us, email me, reach out to us, because I have some very good news. I have some news that says our hope is not built on a temporal nation. Our hope is not built on a fallen world. Rather, our hope is built on the assurance of a resurrected Christ. And that can be your hope as well.